Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast. Welcome in. We are live for episode 197, three away from that big 200 number that we've been pushing towards for the past year now. And today we're doing our week 7 Raw rundown. And if you're new here, we do this every single week of the NFL season, going through three teams that played great and three teams that struggled in week 7. And here moving forward, we're going to be focusing in on the games each week themselves rather than the big picture of things. So before we get into it, though, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, share it with your friends, share it with sports fans that you know. Even if they don't like sports, share it with them anyway, because why not? Um, But joining me from Houston, Texas, the stacking himself, Mr. Michael Wayne. How you doing?
I was thinking about this today, and by the way, welcome everybody to episode 197 of the Raw Prospect Podcast. Is there a better month in sports than October? I just want to throw that question out there for everyone to contemplate. There might be arguments. I'm sure there are other months that are great. I can't really think of it off the top of my head, but if you really think about October, it's college football in full swing. We're in the middle of the college football season. College football playoff storylines are developing. We're far enough into the NFL season where it feels like we have a good enough feel on some of these teams. And, we're kind of seeing the middle pack emerge, the bottom of the NFL separate, and the top elite teams separate. We have the NBA starting in just under 48 hours, and we have playoff baseball. And if you're a hockey fan, we had the start of the hockey season. So it's definitely up there with months of the year that are heaven for sports fans. But today we're here to talk about what was another great Sunday in the NFL. We have a lot of good stuff to talk about: games, storylines, players. But that's where we're going to start with our prospect of the week, as we do every week. So we will start there. Do you want me to go first, or would you like to take the reins?
I'll go ahead and go first with mine. This week, I selected a player that I had high hopes for going into the season. Believe it or not, he was a guy that I thought was underrated during draft season and fell really far in the draft into the 6th or 7th round. And that is Demario Douglas from the New England Patriots. He is we talk a lot about the Patriots and their lack of speed, lack of dynamism, but he's one of the few guys on that team where he pops off the screen when he has the ball in his hands, legitimately. And today he didn't. The stats don't blow you away today. He only had 6 catches, 54 yards. He also had a rush for 20 yards. But when you consider the offensive struggles that New England has had the past 3 weeks, I think they went 3 games or a certain amount of game time where they didn't even reach the red zone like at all. Um, I mean, this is a long time coming in terms of a good offensive performance for the New England Patriots. And moving forward, they gotta feature him more in the offense. There's no question about it. He's their guy that can actually put some fear into defenses with his speed.
Yeah. I was going to talk about New England later on in the show, so I'll save that for when it comes up. I have a similar, I guess, story here for my prospect of the week. I'm not sure if this is a guy that we've already highlighted in the past, but I'm going to say it anyway. I can't remember. This guy his team didn't win today like DeMario Davis's team did. Unfortunately, good for me at least. We'll talk about that later. But I wanted to highlight Puka Nacua because he has been a vocal point of this Rams offense this season. And the 5th-round pick out of Provo, Utah from BYU, started his college career at Washington, kind of fell in the draft and was overlooked by myself. I mean, I didn't even know about him, to be honest with you. During the draft process, I just kind of learned about him in preseason and throughout the start of this season. He is ripping apart defenses. And if you want to kind of put it in perspective, what he's done to start his career through 7 games, only Jamar Chase has had more receiving yards to start his career through 7 games than Puka Nacua has had this year. In 2021, so what was that, 2 years ago, Jamar Chase had 754 receiving yards in his first 7 games with the Cincinnati Bengals. Puka Nacua, if he only had 3 more yards today, would have eclipsed that, as he is now 752 yards on 58 catches through 7 games of his career. He had 154 yards today against Pittsburgh in a losing effort, but he was still pretty much the focal point of that offense. We'll talk about that later. Had a long catch of 36 yards, averaged 19 yards per catch. He's still producing even with the presence of one Cooper Kupp, who we know is one of the best receivers in the league, or has been over the past 3 or 4 years. So good for the Rams for finding another guy that they can use in this offense who's been really productive and doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, I knew about him only a little bit from listening to the Bootleg Football podcast, and that podcast, they get really deep into the weeds. So with Puka, it's just from what I can remember of his story, it was a lot of injuries at BYU, and when he was available, he was extremely productive, and probably would have warranted a higher draft pick at that point. But with the way it worked out and the situation he ended up falling into, it's the perfect fit. Can't really say much else about it. I mean, it's just the absolute perfect fit. The way McVay has him running open down the middle of the field virtually every single play. Um, I mean,
Yep.
it's been unbelievable to say the least. It's not like a guy who's running 4-3 like Tyreek Hill or something. He just has a knack for getting open. He knows where to go on the field, find that open space.
Absolutely. He's a really good player, man. And I'll tell you what, I know your Cowboys, I think, get the Rams next week. Is that game
I
in
think so.
Dallas or LA? Well, regardless,
LA.
I've been watching Nakua ever since I learned about him at the start of the season. And boy, oh boy, he's a great player, but he's annoying as hell to go against if he's going up against your team, because he just finds a way to get open, as you were talking about. So Patrick Peterson couldn't do it. Levi Wallace couldn't do it. They finally said, okay, we're going to put JPJ on him. When the game came down to the waning moments, and JPJ got the job done, at least better than the other guys did. But boy, oh boy, is he a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into the meat of the episode. So I don't know if this is going to work the way it typically works. I'm just planning to let the conversation flow. We want to get more into the weeds of the individual games tonight than we have in the first 6 weeks of the season, because our power rankings episodes every other week, that's more for the big picture. When we look at the teams from 1,000 feet and above, for the most part, we dive into some of the weeds of what's going on in those episodes. So that's every other week. But for these weekly episodes, we really want to talk about the games in particular, because that's what this is. It's a week 7 recap, not a team introspective. So where do you want to start, man? I think the easy place to start would be to talk about what's in the headline of our episode title here, which is the Ravens and what they did to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
defensive line.
it's really hard not to start there. I mean, Lamar Jackson, man. Like, I mean, you can talk on and on about how good Detroit's defense has been to start this season, and Lamar just completely picked them apart. And it didn't feel like Detroit was doing anything differently. They were getting to him at certain spots. Lamar was just bouncing off of tackles, and even when it felt like the Lions had the right defense called, Lamar would just run around and make a play. I mean, that kind of stuff is just unguardable, and it kind of this game kind of feels like this start of okay, Lamar is going to be entering the conversations for those top 3 guys. That's what this game feels like. Obviously, we got to wait and see how consistent this level of play continues to be. But today, it felt like that offense clicked on all cylinders. They got Rashad Bateman involved, OBJ. Zay Flowers continues to be dominant. Um, the running game was fantastic as well with Gus Edwards. It was just everything fit perfectly. Um, and then on the defensive side of the ball, they get Adafe Owe back, and he was just an absolute monster today. One thing I didn't realize going into this game is that the Ravens led the league in sacks. That was one of the questions going into the season is how those pass rushers would do, particularly those young guys. But what I didn't take into account was Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy doing what they've been doing. I mean, they've been huge for this team.
This wasn't just a dismantling, this was domination. I'm sure there are plenty of D words that you can come up with to describe what the Ravens did to the Lions today, some of which are not appropriate for this podcast, but that's a different story for another day. Put the Ravens in the Super Bowl bubble. I'll go ahead and say it, because if they get this level of play from Lamar Jackson, which they have fairly consistently, except for maybe a couple quarters against Pittsburgh and a couple other moments throughout, because I mean, every quarterback has their fair share of not so great moments, even the Mahomes of the world and the elite quarterbacks in this league. But if they get Lamar Jackson completing 71% of his passes for the rest of the season, for 13 total touchdowns with a 105 quarterback rating, along with what he can do with the other part of his game, which is, escape the pocket, make plays with his legs at the most electrifying rate in the NFL, with all their weapons and an offensive line that played well today against a good Detroit defensive front. This team is scary, man. Their defense can get after the quarterback. You're right. That was a stat that I did not realize coming into today. It was kind of like a surprise when I heard that on the broadcast. But they didn't slow down today. They are getting after the quarter. What the Ravens do is they get a lead and then they allow their defense to tee off. They've been a great first quarter team this year. I think they're outscoring opponents like 54-6 in the first quarter, or something close to that this year. And they let that defense do the rest, man. Not that they don't keep scoring on offense. They keep the pedal to the metal most of the time. But that defense with Owe and everyone else that they have, they can get after the quarterback. They pressure. If we're just talking about this game in particular, um, they had 5 sacks on Goff against a good Detroit defensive line. They totally overwhelmed that offensive line for Detroit. They pressured Goff on 20 of his 57 dropbacks today. They were explosive on offense. It wasn't just like, you know, methodical drives. It was 20-plus yard play here, 20-plus yard play there. They finished the game with 10 total plays of 20 or more yards. 9 of those plays came in the first half. I mean, they were tearing apart this Detroit secondary, 7 of which were completions by Lamar Jackson. Lamar, 21 of 27, 357 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, another rushing touchdown to go on top of that, and almost a perfect passer rating. He was so close to a perfect passer rating with a 155.8. I thought he was incredibly patient and poised in the pocket, which he showed all season long. A couple of years ago, man, some of those plays he would just take off and run, and he stayed in the pocket. He moved his feet, and he found guys in the back of the end zone. He found Nelson Aguilar. I think it was their second touchdown is the play that comes
Yeah,
to
that
mind
was
for
the
me.
play that you just dropped your jaw
Yeah,
on that
if
one.
he's doing that, man, like, good luck.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's address the Lions really fast here. They were missing David Montgomery, and that matters definitely. But I think this was a game where they didn't have their running game working, and we saw last week they were able to overcome that. They didn't run the ball that great against the Buccaneers, and Jared Goff still, was able to deliver the ball down the field consistently. But in this particular game, they needed the quick passing game to start clicking, and it didn't feel like um, those tight window throws that Jared Goff had been hitting so consistently were being hit. And this is, I mean, the one bad game from Jared Goff in a stretch of, 14, 15 games dating back to last season. So I can't really knock him too much for it, but um, for the Detroit Lions' sake, they're hoping that this doesn't become a trend and that he gets back to what he's been doing.
Yeah, I mean, I just chalk it up to one of those Sundays in the NFL where you go up
Yeah,
against another really, really good team on the road. I mean, if you look at Detroit, they've been one of the better teams in the NFL dating back to middle of the year last year. They coming into today, they had won 13 of their last 16 games dating back to last year. They had won 4 of 5 pretty convincingly. So they were doing some own domination um, to some of these other teams that they've played. We'll see if maybe some of these things start to develop and become alarming a couple weeks down the road, but they're set up in a great position. What are they, 5-2, with Chicago, who's 2-5, the Packers, who don't look good right now, and the Vikings, who have a losing record uh, in their division. Lions will be okay. The bottom line is the Ravens ran the football for 146 yards, and Lamar Jackson had an MVP performance. And sometimes, you go up against these teams and you don't have it on a particular Sunday, and you move on to the next one.
yeah. And the thing is, and I completely hear you there. I think the problem for me is, you would expect to maybe have an off day on one side of the ball, but um, the hope is for on those days the other side of the ball to pick them up.
Yeah.
Um, Today it was everything, and that's tough at that point.
Tough performance. I'm sure Dan Campbell will get on them. They'll be ready to play next week. I don't even know who they play next week. These things happen in the NFL. The good thing for the Lions is they're not in your conference. You're not going to have to play them when you get into the playoffs until maybe the Super Bowl, if that were to happen. So you move on and you continue to take care of business, get back to what you've been doing, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, I agree with you. I think you would have liked, if you're a Lions fan, to kind of see that defense step up a little bit and not allow what happened to happen. But sometimes, I mean, it's just not your day, and it wasn't the
Yeah.
Lions' day. So we'll see if some of those things become a trend. Um, could be concern, 2 or 3 weeks down the road if we continue to see some of these things. Like they did not get to Lamar today. They got close a couple times, but they weren't able to get him on the ground.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. But I mean, I don't really think I think that much less of the Lions now than
Yeah.
I did at the
I don't
start of
either.
today. I think we kind of have them properly rated. Like I think they're a tier below the Eagles and the Niners, but they're up there in the NFC with everyone else.
Right.
Okay. A game I wanted to talk about was this Buffalo New England game, and then I think we'll move on to Atlanta, Tampa Bay, and Cleveland, Indianapolis. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah. Sounds good.
So let's talk about this Bills Patriots game, which the Patriots ended up winning. Much needed victory for that group. Bill Belichick's 300th career victory in the NFL. That's just a side note for everyone who's wondering. Um, they found a way to win. This was a ball club that has struggled against the Bills the past couple of years, especially in the including the time they matched up in the playoffs a couple years back. Um, it's kind of a weird trend for the Bills starting to develop. They've started very slow offensively the past 3 weeks, ever since they dismantled the Dolphins back in week 4, I think it was. The past 3 weeks, they've been outscored 30-10 by Jacksonville, the Giants, and New England. Only 10 points in the first half for the Bills the past 3 weeks. And the reason that's, it's not that the Bills, who are still can be and are explosive offensively to a degree and have an improved running game, can't dig themselves out of holes. They did it today, and they've done it in the past. They were down 22-10, I think, in the fourth quarter, and they scored 15 consecutive points to take the lead in that game, 25-22. Their defense just couldn't hold up on the other side. We'll talk about that in a minute. But what it does do when you're continually falling behind in games is it significantly decreases your margin for error. Once you're down 2 possessions in the NFL, your defense has to be, I don't want to say perfect, but they got to get stops. There's no room to allow the other team to go down and tack on to make it a 3-score game at that point. You know what I mean? So I don't know what's going on early in games for the Bills the past 3 weeks. Maybe it's just they've played a couple pretty good defenses. We know New England's defense is pretty good. It's had its struggles this season, but I mean, they get up for those divisional games at home. Belichick is as good as it gets in game planning still on that side of the football. And they played Jacksonville a couple weeks back in London, which is kind of a weird circumstance that not every team has to experience after they just, blew the doors off Miami. But you don't want to see this trend continue if you're Buffalo. I don't know what's attributing to it. I would never know. I maybe it's just, I mean, my team has the same issue to a much, much worse extent than the Buffalo Bills. But it is something to watch over the next couple weeks if this thing continues.
Yeah, the Bills are 1-3 in one score games right now, and obviously that removes context from the equation. But the big thing for the Bills offensively right now is it just doesn't feel like they're getting the implied offense just out of either the running game or that quick passing game that we saw them really go to in those 3 weeks where they were cooking. Those 3 weeks they were picking teams apart in that quick passing
Yep.
game. And James Cook was great today. You can't blame this loss on him. He
Nope.
played his heart out. He played great, but um, the quick passing game is where I think they need to lean on a little bit more. They really try to drive the ball down the field, and obviously with Josh Allen, you have that ability available to you. But um, I just I don't think challenging those tight windows deep down the field is really playing to the percentages right now. And sometimes the ball is just going to bounce the wrong way. Um, like for example, 4th and 2, they're down 16-10 late in the third quarter. Um, Josh Allen throws a great pass to Dawson Knox, hits him in the chest. He gets hit, ball pops out, and then turnover on downs. On that particular drive as well, earlier in the drive, Josh Allen had Stephon Diggs open down the field and missed him, overthrew him. That would have been a touchdown. Ended up taking off the board, and then the penalties started
Yep.
killing them as well. As soon as they start to get momentum offensively, as soon as they start moving the ball and trying to take control of the game, which I thought that point was really important as well because they had a chance to take the lead, but um, they just they couldn't execute. They couldn't quite execute.
I don't know how this season's going to play out. There's no way to know. I mean,
Yeah,
we think we know in some areas, but I mean, it's really impossible to know. It's all of a sudden too. I guess the word would be confounding losses within your own division for the Bills. I mean, the opening week game against the Jets, I would call that a confounding loss, although the Jets did what they had to do to win that. And then this game, kind of controlled by the Patriots for a majority of it. So
yeah,
give the Patriots credit there. And we're going to talk about Mac Jones in a second. But this was another one that they had. Their defense couldn't get it done. It came down to execution. It didn't really execute offensively good enough for much of the game. And you just hate to see the injuries continue to pile up on this defense. I mean, we already knew about Tre'Davious White. We already knew about Matt Milano last week or the week before. I can't remember. But Ed Oliver has been dealing with some stuff. Daquan Jones has been dealing with some stuff. It's just not ideal from a defensive standpoint. Uh, this Ken Dorsey offense hasn't looked in sync for now 3 weeks running. They pulled it out against the Giants, but they lost to Jacksonville. They lost to the Patriots this week. Um, there's still some chances that Josh Allen continues to take that I don't think he should. Um, I don't know. I still believe in the Bills. I still think they have that Mike Tyson quality about them. But they're kind of a confounding team right now. Like it feels like.
yeah.
Go ahead.
I think they do have the Mike Tyson quality, but can they have the Mike Tyson quality 3 straight times? Is the thing, you know?
Oh yeah, when it comes to the playoffs, that's absolutely fair. But we're in week 7 right now, and
Yeah,
if you continue to lose these games, man, you're going to put yourself in possibly a more precarious position than you might want to be later on in the season when you're fighting for maybe not even playoff seeding, maybe just a playoff spot. You got to
yeah,
be very careful about what you know. You got to take every game seriously in this AFC because I don't know that there is. I mean, the Chiefs are 6-1, so that's that. And we know how good the Dolphins are, even though they lost to the Eagles tonight. But there are a lot. I mean, the Ravens are now 5-2, but my point is there are a lot of teams in that middle of the pack in the AFC that are going to be scratching and crawling for those wild card spots. And 2 division losses already. I know you have the win over the division leading Dolphins, but I'm not worried. I'm not sounding any alarm bells or anything yet, but you just got to be careful if you're Buffalo. That's all I'm saying. On the positions you put yourself in later on the season, because it's going to be hard enough to go on the road in the playoffs to Kansas City. We've already seen that in the past couple of years. And you're right, like it's hard in the NFL, especially in the playoffs, to have that Mike Tyson knockout quality in the biggest of the biggest games. Like you're just not going to do that to the best of the best. Um,
Yeah, they're always going to punch back.
Last thing we need to say is, boy, credit to Mac Jones, man. As much as we're going to criticize him, probably the rest of the season, as much as we have criticized him in the past, he put on a performance today, came up big when it mattered, led him on an 8-play, 69-yard drive. I thought he was great throwing the football over the middle of the field. Um, he made the plays when he had to, and he won the game for him with that touchdown pass to Mike Gesicki. So give him credit.
Yeah, Bill O'Brien very clearly came in with a game plan of we're going to make these linebackers work sideline to sideline and use that to open up the middle of the field. And with that being said, the Bills really, really missed Matt Milano today because on those types of things, Matt Milano is almost like a chess master in that regard. He knows where to be on those types of things.
Yep.
The Patriots came out and just worked the edges in the passing game with Demario Douglas and a few other receivers as well, just making those linebackers work sideline to sideline, and then from there really opened up the middle of the field with those tight ends and even on the you know drives where the Patriots didn't score, they were moving the ball. Usually, when the Patriots didn't score in this game, it was because of what they did, not what the Bills did. So, um, hopefully, this is something the Patriots can build off of because we said it earlier in the year, like they were better than what their record was, and then things kind of fell apart offensively.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like now, after that Raiders game where they played a little bit better, it seems like now it's kind of returned to normalcy. It might be a little bit too late, but they can at least, maybe salvage 6 or 7 wins here if and maybe spoil some seasons for their rivals.
And that showed a lot of character, I think, for Mac Jones as
Definitely,
well. So that's, I think, as if I were a Patriots fan, at least, that would be the thing that I take maybe the most solace in today. I mean, it's great beating a division rival at home, a game you had to have to avoid going to what 1-6 on the season,
yeah,
and basically totally out of it at that point. You get the win, and now all of a sudden, things feel a lot better than they did 24 hours ago. Uh,
definitely.
when I mean, I didn't really think all that much about this game until, to be honest with you, until this morning. I haven't really been thinking in that game preview, game prediction mindset so far this NFL season. I just watched the games on Sunday for my enjoyment and for this podcast. But I don't know that a whole lot of people would have given the Patriots a chance to win this game today based on what's occurred in this particular game the past couple of years and how the Patriots have looked the past month or so. But
Yeah.
this is the NFL, man, any given Sunday. So I want to
Yeah.
move on to a couple other games here that we need to get to. This divisional matchup, one of the bigger games of the day, I think, between the Falcons and the Bucks. Your thoughts on this one?
Well, we gave our credit to Mac Jones. Now we got to give our credit to Desmond Ritter.
Yep.
I think, it wasn't all perfect. He had, I think, 2 or 3 fumbles today, and one of them was very ugly, right at the 1 yard line, ended up being a touchback and giving the ball back to the Buccaneers. But for one, the the passing game did look a lot more sharp. He wasn't, putting the ball in harm's way, didn't, throw any interceptions today. And was sharp. He was had a really high completion percentage today as well. Was getting the ball down the field and also had a deep shot. I think it was early in the third quarter to Scotty Miller on an absolute beauty of a throw over the top. That's an element of this offense that had been absolutely non-existent. So if we see more of that, then you know the Falcons will be, the favorites to win the division because we already know what the weapons they have and the defense that they've showed to start the season. It's just all a matter of can Desmond Ritter give you solid quarterback play, and he's done that.
Desmond Ritter deserves his props today. And to be honest with you, if you look at the grand scheme of things over the past 3 or 4 games, he's been pretty good as a passer, good enough as a passer to win the Falcons games. And I think he's good enough, with his ability to move, get out of the pocket, make plays with his feet as well. He was efficient today in the passing game, good enough to get the job done, plenty good enough to get the job done. You mentioned the high completion percentage. He was efficient, 19 of 25, 250 yards, a 107 quarterback rating. That's good enough to get out of state. That's going to be good enough to get out of the stadiums most days, at least playing within your division with the circumstances surrounding you in your division. He averaged 10 yards per attempt. He pushed the ball downfield, and he was doing it efficiently. The only thing, though, is you can't fumble 3 times in the red zone.
Yeah.
Can't do that. It seems the only issue plaguing him right now, and we see this a lot with young quarterbacks, is ball security. It's just something that he's struggling with right now. Now, it didn't really hurt them today. Their defense stepped up. They got the job done. You have to give them credit there. You still have to give – I'm not taking anything away from what Desmond Ritter did elsewhere, but this coaching staff, whoever it might be, has to find a way to clean up some of these issues with ball security with Desmond Ritter because it could hurt them down the road. What they did do well today is they ran the ball, even without the presence of one Bijan Robinson, who I guess could be chalked up to having some kind of illness today. They had an effective ground game, 160 yards on the ground, over 4 yards per carry. Tyler Algier, whoever else it may be in that backfield, really good. They got pressure on Baker Mayfield, or at least enough pressure on Baker Mayfield, and they played opportunistic defense. They had 2 turnovers. They forced 2 turnovers, and they sacked Baker 3 times, and they got some more pressure on him. I mean, this seems to be kind of the formula. I'd like to see more of Bijan in the future. Hopefully, this was just a game where, for whatever health reasons, they held him out a little bit. I like to see them, stay committed to the running game. I want to see Desmond Ritter continue to make progress. But this is a big road win in division. You'll take that any day of the week in the NFL.
Yeah, definitely. And after losing the way they did to Washington the week before, I think it's just a big win for their psyche as well.
Yeah. 4-3. I mean, you'll take that in the NFL. There are still some things they have to clean up, but like every team, I mean, teams are dealing with things all over the league. I think they were 1 for 5 in the red zone today. You'd like to be better than that, but a lot of that was because of the fumbles and the ball security issues that they had down there. They're still not great on third down, but they've gotten better. I think there was something like 6 for 13 today, which is good enough in today's game to get you out of a stadium. But big win, and I think they should be favored to win the division. It's just, continuing to make progress with your young quarterback. Do you have anything to say on the Buccaneers before we move on to this Browns-Colts game?
Well, I think Baker's bugaboo throughout his career has been holding onto the ball a little bit too long.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of came back to bite him today. And some of that was obviously the Falcons' coverage, playing a really good game with A.J. Terrell and Jesse Bates and all those guys. But I think up to this point for the Bucks, Baker had been really sharp in terms of getting the ball out and knowing where to go with the football, knowing where his check down is,
Mm-hmm.
and just not having those big sacks that shut drives down.
Yeah.
And today took a step back in that regard. So they just got to clean that up. That's really the only thing I'll say about the Bucks.
Yeah, I mean, you're still in it in the division. If you're the Bucks, you're 3-3. I agree with you. That's been an issue with Baker. I think at this point, though, kind of is who he is. I mean, how many years into his career is he? He does have a good rapport and a good connection with Mike Evans, and I still like parts of this Bucks team. Um, I mean, the NFC playoff picture is still kind of murky right now in terms of teams that I think will be vying for a wild card. I know a couple teams right at the top of my head, but it'll be interesting. I don't really have all that much to add on to what you said about Tampa Bay, so let's just not beat around the bush and move on here. The next game I wanted to touch on before I think we could probably move to the late window of games because there were only 6 games in the early window anyway, was this Browns Colts game, which, by the way, if you're into stats or nuggets, which I try to bring to this podcast, this game had 8 lead changes. That's the most in an NFL game in 4 years, which might surprise some people, but I read that sentence like,
I
wow.
think 4 of them were in the fourth quarter as well.
Yeah, it was pretty nuts. And it's the 15th game in the 104-year history of the NFL with 8 or more lead changes. So this doesn't happen very often, this kind of game. But it happened today, and the Browns found a way to win. A lot of the credit goes to the one, the only Myles Garrett, who was a game wrecker. But I will hand the floor to you for your thoughts first. You can go either way you want. You can touch on both teams, or you can go right to the Browns. You pick.
Well, this was an ugly one. And if you're a Colts fan, this one probably stings if you're a Colts fan because Gardner was really up and down. Just really good play design from Shane Steichen. They were moving the ball up and down the field, but for whatever reason, it seemed like in crucial spots, Baker was turning over the football, and that's really what flipped the game. The interception, the fumble that ended up happening, and then obviously the block, the blocked kick from early in the game really ended up coming back to bite them as well. But um, you can't fault the Colts too much for that game. I think defensively they, were a little bit leaky in terms of rush defense, but um, overall they kept in it against a really good Browns defense. So I think playing with your backup quarterback and you put up a 38-point performance against the best defense in football up to this point, you can hold your head up a little bit from that. And then the Browns, I don't know what to say about what we saw in that first quarter from Deshaun Watson. Um, that was probably some of the worst quarterback play we've seen this year, and that's saying a lot because Deshaun Watson played earlier this year. So, um, oh man, his arm looked weak, and obviously probably the shoulder was just still bothering him, and he shouldn't have suited up in the first place. But man, like it's one thing for your shoulder to just be still not quite right, like that's fine, but still trying to chuck it 30 yards down the field, even with your shoulder the way it is, that's just not that's not a good recipe. Like I would hope as a guy who's been in the league for what is it 6 7 years at this point would have the self awareness to just be like, okay, I'm just gonna check the ball down today. But he didn't, and luckily for them, he ended up tweaking his shoulder a little bit and leaving the game because that's what ended up giving them an actual competent offense the rest of the game.
There's one performance from Deshaun Watson since he came back late in the season last year that I think you could call good at this point, and that was a couple weeks back when they beat down the Titans 27 to
Yep.
3, and I thought he actually kind of propelled them offensively in that game. Everything else has either been meh or bad. Um, at least to my knowledge, to what I can remember, what I can recall. Wasn't good enough, man. The Browns got to figure this thing out at quarterback because you're not going to. I mean, I know you have a great defense. I know you have a good roster. I know there are parts of this Browns team that I really, really like as a fan of a division rival, and some parts of this Browns team that I, at this point, fear. Like that Browns defense is, I mean, it can strike fear into some opposing offenses the way that it's playing. It didn't play all that well today, but it did good enough, right? It was probably the reason they won the game. They had that strip sack in the end zone, which got them 7 points. Credit to Myles Garrett on that play. They got the blocked field goal, which probably may have made a difference now that we look back on it on the final score of this game, or could have made a difference on the final score of this game. Credit to Myles Garrett there. Um, Credit to Myles Garrett on getting another strip sack in this game. He was just all over the place. But with all that being said, you can't win the Super Bowl. You can't get to the AFC Championship game with this level of quarterback play. It's not 2005 anymore. Yeah, but that's conversation. I mean, you're 4-2. You won the game. You got out of the stadium in a road win. Jerome Ford had another good day running the football. He opened the game up with that long touchdown run. On the Colts side, I think Shane Steichen is the guy. Like, if anything
Yeah.
else this year, whether you end up winning 7 games or you end up winning 9 games, both of which I think could be
On the
outcomes
cards.
for this Colts season. You know you have the coach, and you hope you have the quarterback. It's just that guy's hurt right now,
Right.
or you have the potential at quarterback. And I like some of the pieces on this Colts offense. The addition of Zach Moss has been valuable. We all love Jonathan Taylor, but Josh Downs, man, the rookie out of North Carolina, he's starting to show himself a little bit. He's had back-to-back pretty damn good performances. He had the explosive touchdown early on in this game to answer back when the Browns went up 7-0. He made a couple other plays. We obviously all like Michael Pittman Jr. I like some of the pieces the Colts have. Their offensive line hasn't necessarily been it hasn't been great, but it's not the reason the Colts. It's plenty good enough. They're moving the football. They're scoring points, and the defense has made some plays. So it's like you're 3-4, but I do think you're playing a brand of football that's respectable, and I think this is a brand of football that can win the Colts games down the road. It's unfortunate that they're playing with a backup quarterback, albeit I think you're playing with one of the better backup quarterbacks you can have in Gardner Minshew. Like, he's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but he can get you in and out of stadiums. And he almost did today against one of the best defenses we've seen to start a season in NFL history.
Yeah. One last thing I'll say is that late in the game pass interference call. I don't know if you saw this, but I believe it was. Oh my goodness! I think it was
Was it Donovan?
3rd and 3 or something like that from the 8.
Yeah,
They had to get to the 5-yard line. PJ Walker chucks it to the back of the end zone, the back right part of the end zone. It was an uncatchable football, and I understand if you call holding there because he did hold, but that clearly was an catchable football, and then moving him down to the 1 was a little bit, it changed things a lot
absolutely.
because clock was running. Clock was a real factor, and moving them down to one made it to where they could have the entirety of their playbook available to them. So it definitely changed things a lot.
Yeah, there were a couple controversial calls on Colts defensive back Darrell Baker in this game. Most fans that aren't Browns fans would disagree with them, but it is what it is. Sometimes you get those calls, sometimes you don't. My team probably benefited from a call or two today. There were plenty of examples in college football this past weekend where that happened. So, it is what it is. You almost won if you're the Colts. You hate to have that influence the outcome of the game, but it is what it is. There was an illegal contact penalty earlier, I think, in the drive, or somewhere mixed in there, that gave the Browns sort of new life, if you will. So it is what it is. I mean, you can't go back and change it now. You just got to move on. But let's move to the late window here of games. Before we do that, though, credit to Tyson Bagent for the Chicago Bears. Just thought we should mention him. He didn't light up the stat sheet. He didn't do anything particularly special, but I thought he showed poise, and he showed, I think, that he can be a capable backup in this league.
Yeah, he was solid today for sure.
He won the Bears the game. So I think that's it. What was the other game in the late window? I can't even recall.
Packers Broncos. And then it was it 2 games in the late window? Or was it 3?
Well, now we'll move on to the late window. In the late window, we had Seahawks Cardinals, we had Steelers Rams, we had Chargers Chiefs.
Oh, right.
And there was one other. Where do you want to start here? I definitely want to talk about Steelers Rams. We could go Chargers Chiefs, though. I have something to say about Seahawks Cardinals as well, so it's up to you.
Let's start with Steelers Rams, I guess.
Okay. I guess I'll start this one. This was typical Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, it really was. They win the game 24-17. The bad is the offense was non-existent again in the first half. It continues to struggle in the first half. The good, though, is they had one of their best quarters offensively in that fourth quarter. It looked like a good NFL offense at the very least. It looked like the offense we saw back in preseason. And I do think you can't go without you can't go talking about this game without mentioning that the Steelers had Deontay Johnson back in this game, which I think made a difference, especially on a couple plays. When it mattered, and this is what the Steelers team has done so far in a couple games this year, they played better than the Rams did. They outgained the Rams 191-25 in the fourth quarter. They outscored them 14-0. They shut them out in the fourth quarter. Kenny Pickett, fourth quarter, 7-7, 138 yards, a 120.8 quarterback rating. He continues to come up big in big moments in one possession games early on in his career, even though he oftentimes struggles and looks not so great the rest of the game, which is a fair criticism. The Rams had some kicking issues today, which was weird. I mean, Brett Maher missed 2 field goals and an extra point, which is kind of ironic when you consider they lost this game by 7 points. The Rams did run the football effectively. I'm worried about the Steelers' run defense as it continues to get gashed week after week without Cam Hayward. Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman, kind of a patched together backfield for the Rams, ran for 130 yards on the ground. But I think really what this comes down to is you let the Steelers hang around, this is what they do. Like, you can't throw that interception to TJ Watt if you're Stafford. I mean, I know Watt made a great play on the ball. That's what he does, but can't make that mistake. And then at the end of the day, Steelers got going in the fourth quarter. You got to give them some credit. I thought Jalen Warren and Najee Harris actually ran the ball well today. Both of them did. Warren had a touchdown and Harris had a touchdown. His first of the season, I believe. So give him credit there. The fourth down call at the very end, that wasn't a first down. But it's unfortunate for the Rams that in that situation, you couldn't go to the booth review because it wasn't under 2 minutes. And McVay had already used both of his timeouts remaining, so he couldn't call a timeout and challenge the play. So, I mean, bad call by the refs, but that happens every week. And if you're the Rams, you shouldn't have been in that position in the first place, getting outgained by a terrible offense, 191-25 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, I mean, I don't really have much to add from what you said, but I mean, the Matthew Stafford interception to me was what completely flipped this thing because you're looking at getting points right there,
Yep.
and extending that lead
Yep.
at that point, and I mean, you flip the entire momentum, and then the fact that it was really a road game for the Rams kind of hurt as well.
Yep.
I think
Seen that before.
as soon as the Steelers got some momentum, it was like legitimately loud as if they were in a opposing stadium. So that didn't help at all. I'm not gonna write off the Rams just yet,
No.
but this one definitely hurt for sure. They've lost a couple of close ones.
Yeah, this one hurts. Puka Nakua, fantastic. Run game, good if you're the Rams. I thought actually they protected Matthew Stafford good enough against a
Yeah,
good
no sacks for TJ Watt today.
no sacks for TJ Watt. They were doing everything they could to chip him, double team him, do everything they could to keep him from wrecking this game even more. He did get the interception, but he didn't really have all that much of an effect in the pass rush game. Alex Highsmith did have a sack, and Nick Herbig, the rookie, did have a sack. But other than that, the Steelers didn't really get to Stafford all that much. It was just that turnover to start the third quarter. You get the touchdown to go up 9-3 going into halftime. You come out with the football. You have all the momentum to start that third quarter. You're looking to tack on points there, go up 2 possessions. You weren't able to do it. TJ Watt made a great play on a crossing route. To be honest with you, I don't think teams really expect TJ Watt to be lining up against slot receivers. So, I mean, that is what it is, but he does that sometimes, and he's done that before. And then the offense had some moments, but it just wasn't able to pay it off at that point, and the Steelers woke up. They had 2 really good drives, and even though that call at the end of the game kind of goes against the Rams, well, yeah, I mean, play better next time, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you can't blame this loss on the refs. Definitely not. Have the Steelers thought about trying TJ Watt at tight end? By the way,
I don't know what they think of. I mean, at this point, it's kind of like, and I'll say this and we can move on. It's kind of like Tomlin has this magic power where he just wills this team to stay in games, and then he uses that whatever it is magic potion to get the Steelers to win these games. They win more close games than almost any other team in the league. Every single Steelers game is close, and more times than not, they're winning these games. I don't know if this formula is sustainable. You can't win a Super Bowl this way, that's for sure. Could you get to the playoffs? Sure, especially if you keep winning on the road and winning games within your division. And you have now, I think, get 3 consecutive games at home. I think it's the Jaguars, which all of a sudden becomes a big game next week in the AFC. And then it's the Titans on Thursday night, and then it's the Packers. So we'll see what happens. But it's kind of like it's been like this the past couple of years, especially with Tomlin. It's like they're in the game, and then the Steelers won. How the fuck did that happen? It's kind of what it is.
Yeah. But it's not even the fact that they're in the game. It's like they're sleepwalking too.
Yeah. And the fire candidate chants all over the country, not just in Pittsburgh, will continue. We saw fire candidate chants at game day in Ohio this week. I mean, it's becoming a thing. But welcome to Steelers football. All right. Enough of that. Let's talk about this Chiefs-Chargers game. Your thoughts?
Well, my only thought is, why did I have to play Travis Kelce in fantasy this week? That's one. That's the first thing I thought of. But, man, I mean, this Chiefs team just continues to just own the AFC West.
Yep.
There was a split second where I think I actually chose the Chargers to win the division last year, which was, I mean, in hindsight, just so dumb. But I mean, this division is it's the Chiefs division until Patrick Mahomes retires. Like it's that simple. It really is. Mahomes today, I think this was probably his best game all season overall.
Yep. I would agree.
Just didn't miss a beat, didn't miss a throw. It felt like got his receivers involved. Rasheed Rice got a touchdown.
Mm-hmm. Valdez-Scantling had a touchdown.
Yeah. It felt like this was the Chiefs wide receivers' best game of the year as well, which is a scary thought as well. And then the second half, the defense proved why they should be the talk of the town in Kansas City. I mean, they're probably a top 5 or 6 unit in football.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
they're not going anywhere. They're still the favorites to win the Super Bowl.
Yep, and they had number 15. They have that guy named Andy Reid, who, if you're new to the NFL, is pretty damn good at what he does. They have a guy named Travis Kelce, who's like all-time great at the tight end position, and he was again today on National Tight Ends Day with Taylor Swift in attendance. They bring in McCole Hardman, who they had some familiarity with, and he, helped them, I think, a little bit. This was the Chiefs receivers' best game. Mahomes threw for 300 yards in the first half, just ripping apart this Chargers secondary. Chargers could not get much of any pressure on Mahomes. I think they had 1 sack all day. Not good enough. Not going to cut it, especially in Arrowhead. The Chargers are now allowing 310 passing yards per game, most in the NFL. No other team is allowing more than 275 passing yards per game. So just keep that in mind. You have a defensive coach in Brandon Staley. It's not seeming to be working there. Their second half offense has been horrendous. They have 10 second half points scored in their past 3 games. You're now 2-4. I don't want to bring this back to like the coaching conversation, but how much if this continues and say in 3 weeks the Chargers are sitting at 3-6 or something like that, how long does Brandon Staley have a job, if at all?
I think to the end of the season, tops. I think the Chargers ownership is trying to be, forward thinking and trying to have continuity. I think that's part of the reason why he's still there. Staley has convinced them that he's like some like forward thinking genius with his analytics and all that stuff. Um, but at some point, just I mean, cut it off, man. I mean, this thing is done. It's been done.
Yeah, I get it. Like you want to have that continuity. You're trying to battle. It's already kind of the middle of the season. Not really, but it's kind of there. I mean, we're almost to November for Pete's sake. So I mean, it's technically not the middle of the season because we just finished week 7 and the regular season's 18 weeks. But in a couple weeks it will be. And if you're, I don't know what the Chargers schedule is, but I mean, it just feels like you have way too much talent on this roster to be 2-4. You've got way too much talent on that defense to be giving up this many yards, to be getting gashed and not good situationally on third downs and late in games like you probably should be with this amount of talent on your defense. You have a defensive coach and the defense is lost at times. I feel bad for Justin Herbert, but some of this is also on him. Like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. That's kind of what I always come back to with the Chargers. It's kind of like, well, it's the Chargers. I mean, I don't know what's going on. You look at that division though, and this is, I think, kind of the last thing we can say before we can wrap it up with Sunday Night Football. Unless there's another game you want to talk about. You look at the Chiefs at 6-1. Everyone else, you have the Raiders at 3-4. You have now the Chargers at 2-4, and the Broncos at 2-5. So it's kind of like right now it's looking like the Chiefs might have that thing wrapped up by early December if this keeps going the way it is.
Yeah, this thing might be wrapped up right now. Honestly, not mathematically,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I don't see the Raiders doing anything. I don't see the Chargers doing anything. I don't see the Broncos doing anything, and I don't see the Chiefs losing anytime soon, or at least not a losing streak that would be required to bring these other teams back into it. So
Yeah, I agree with you. Okay. Real fast on the Seahawks or on the Seahawks Cardinals game, and we'll wrap this thing up. I thought the Seahawks defense was pretty good today, especially in the second half. Jordan Brooks impressed me. He was a draft pick from a couple years back out of, I believe, Texas Tech. Can't remember exactly.
I think so. I think it was Texas Tech. Yeah.
9 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, had half a sack, a couple pass breakups. Darrell Taylor created some good pressure today for that Seahawks defense. They held the Cardinals to 88 second half yards. It wasn't pretty offensively for Seattle this week. It was kind of inconsistent, clunky all day long. But Geno was good throwing the football downfield today. On throws of 20 or more yards, he was 5 for 6 for 129 yards and 2 touchdowns. So they made plays downfield. They didn't have DK Metcalf. I thought they were able to get Jackson Smith and Jigma involved a little bit more today. He had, I think, 4 catches for over 60 or 70 yards, which is better than what he's been doing in the past. So it's kind of a weird feel right now for Seattle, but they're 4-2. And they're in the wild card hunt, at least in the NFC, kind of where I thought they would be at this point. So that's really what you can chalk that up to, I guess.
Yeah, really for Seattle, I think they're counting the weeks until they play San Francisco because I think by then things will have solidified a little bit more. We'll know a little bit more about these two teams, and I think by then they'll be right in the hunt for 10, 11 wins. So that's really the measuring stick of their season. I think if they can go beat San Francisco, get some momentum going into the playoffs, and then from there, who knows what'll happen.
Okay, so we're an hour, 10 minutes in. We can wrap this thing up fittingly with a recap of Sunday Night Football, 11:48. So we have about 12 minutes until midnight to try to wrap this thing up pretty precisely. Although I think this has been a great new way of sort of changing things up and having really thorough conversation about the best games of the day. This can be something we do moving forward, along with talking about the teams that were good mixed within. Your thoughts on Sunday Night Football, though? Eagles, Dolphins.
Well, the Eagles dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. That was the first. I mean, that's the first thing. I think there was like a bit of a lull in the second quarter where the Eagles weren't quite running the football, and Miami kind of bowed their necks a little bit and was able to ball it up for a little while. But the floodgates really opened in the second half. Jalen Hurts started hitting the short passing game consistently. And from there, it just felt like they were kind of moving the ball up and down the field at will. Um, I think really this game ended when Tua threw that interception. They were down 24-17 at that point and driving. And I believe we're already deep in the Eagles' territory. I think at like the 35 or something like that when that happened. So if you're the Dolphins, I think this is a game. I mean, you played them tight. I mean, you didn't play your best football. You didn't run the football really at all, and you still kind of hung around. I think the big problem is you don't want to see the penalties be this bad. The penalties were awful tonight,
Yeah.
and then the other thing is um, the offensive line um, was an issue today.
Mm-hmm.
Legitimately, I think without Teron Armstead and without Connor Williams, you could really notice just how vulnerable these tackles were to these Eagles edge rushers, and there wasn't anything the Dolphins could do.
Yeah, really, there's nothing anybody can do about this play the Eagles have on fourth down. You may have seen it by now, where they line up under center and they just push Jalen Hurts forward for the first down on those fourth and shorts. It's incredibly effective. I don't think I've ever seen it fail. Um, I think they're calling it what, the brotherly shove up there in
Yeah,
Philadelphia.
I prefer the tush push, but
Either way, man, I
yeah,
mean, it gets the job done. Um, you know, Philadelphia went 4 for 4 on fourth downs. All the tush pushes worked, if you will. When they reached the red zone, they scored touchdowns on 4 of their 5 trips. Plenty good red zone efficiency. Um, Miami had a chance to tie the game in the fourth quarter, but then Darius Slay had the big pick when they threw it down the right sideline, and Tua kind of underthrew that ball. Huge interception. It was a weird play. I think they had, what was it, Mostert and a receiver kind of in the same area, which doesn't you don't
yeah. That was the second time that had happened tonight as
yeah, you don't
well.
really see that happen typically with this Mike McDaniel's offense, but I guess it's just one of those nights. Um, so yeah, Philly did what they had to do to win. They dominated the line of scrimmage. You can't have 10 penalties on the road in the NFL and think you're gonna just win the game. So they got to clean some of that stuff up. Um, the Dolphins were coming into tonight one of the better, if not the best, rushing offense statistically, at least in the National Football League. That was completely shut down. The Eagles were having none of it. Raheem Mostert had 4 carries for -7 yards in the first half. And Tua was held to a season low, 6.8 yards per attempt. Give credit to that Eagles defense for really limiting what this Dolphins offense was able to do tonight. Um, they did get their 17 points, but this was a Dolphins offense that's leading the league in a lot of categories, and the Eagles weren't going to let them come into their house and have it their way. So give credit to the Eagles. They're now 6-1, and they have 2 key divisional games coming up with the Commies, the Commanders, next week, and then the Biggie with Dallas in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I hate how good this Eagles team is. I really do. I mean, Jalen Hurts, every single bad game he's ever had, it feels like he comes back just looking as good as ever. I mean, some of the throws he had tonight were amazing. Just it felt like he got all of his wide receivers involved. He didn't miss a beat, and just I don't know. It felt a little bit more crisp. It felt a little bit more like they felt last year, where they just had an answer for everything. And if they find that secret serum that Shane Steichen had, then
Yeah.
look out.
Yeah, and I want to. Dolphins did have their chance. I mean, they played a competitive game for most of it. It wasn't pretty by any stretch of the imagination, but they did have one more chance, I think, late in the third or sometime in the fourth quarter, I actually think it was, where they were down. I think it was 24-17. They had it. They were approaching the red zone. They had a chance to tie, and then that play down the right sideline happened. Darius Slay picks it off, and from there, the Eagles marched 13 plays, 85 yards, methodically down the field. A drive that included 2 fourth-down conversions and a 42-yard deep ball from Hurts to A.J. Brown that basically put the game away. Um, that's what that's what we've seen the Eagles do past couple of years. So give credit to Jalen Hurts. Just keeps. I mean, think about it. These two guys, these two quarterbacks tonight were on the same team, and they worked kind of in tandem to win Alabama a national championship a couple of years back. Remember Jalen Hurts comes out of that game against Georgia, and Tua comes in, and he throws the game-winning touchdown pass to guess who? Devontae Smith, who was also in this game. Kind of a cool storyline there, but
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts got the job done tonight, so give credit to him. How do you want to wrap this thing up? We're kind of right where we want to be, just before midnight. Anything else that we forgot?
Not really. I think for next week, maybe we'll choose which games we want to focus on before the show even starts. That way we can
Yeah,
um, keep it below an hour. But this was a good first run through of this uh, adjustment to the segment. I think. Let us know what you thought of it. Sorry for being low energy. I have a bit of a sore throat and just not feeling that my best. I'm not sick or anything, but
yeah.
definitely not feeling 100% at the moment.
We've all been there, done that. Another great day in the NFL, another great day of sports. Tomorrow night, boy, we're going to get the Game 6 of the NLCS, and I believe we're getting Game 7 of the ALCS. So we've got some great playoff baseball on deck. As far as what the week looks like before we sign off and get out of here, Emmy's having eye surgery on Tuesday, so we're gonna have to work around some of that, and we definitely will do our best to do that. But I'm hoping tomorrow we can get a dit hole in, because we kind of need to now that some of these things are developing, not only within Texas circles but elsewhere in college football. And we're gonna have a World Series preview later on this week. So keep your eye out for all of that. I'll probably have an end of week dit hole as well. I'm not sure if Emmy will be on that. Haven't even gotten that far yet. And we also have the NBA season starting up this week. So I would guess starting next week is when we'll start to really dig into the NBA, at least on a maybe bi-weekly basis during football season. So keep an eye out for all that. If you enjoy our content, please like and subscribe, or tell your friends about it, as it says at the bottom of your screen. And I guess just like the chances of college football Saturdays and NFL Sundays disappointing this season, which they have not been, we are going, gone. Peace out. Good night, y'all.